Forward TV. The world is thinking.
Good afternoon and welcome to our Commonwealth Club Silicon Valley program brought to you from the Coverly Theater in Palo Alto. My name is Alyssa Burkett. I'm the Vice President of Advancement for American Leadership Forum Silicon Valley. It's my pleasure to introduce Barbara Erhenreich, author of Bright-Sided, How the Relentless Promotion of Positive Thinking Has Undermined America. Barbara is a regular columnist for Time magazine, frequent contributor to The Nation, Harper's, and the New York Times, and best-selling author of Nickel and Dimed and Bait and Switch, The Futile Pursuit of the American Dream. Her advocacy and social critiques have covered everything from healthcare for the underprivileged to improved rights for women. Barbara has taught at the Graduate School of Journalism at the University of California, Berkeley, and founded United Professionals, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization for white-collar workers. She was named Humanist of the Year by the American Humanist Association. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Barbara Erhenreich.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. Can I do this once myself? Wow. Whoa. It's fun. All right, I'm going to speak against positive thinking, and that sounds, I know, so twisted and so mean and so sick that I have to explain a little bit. First, I am not against having a nice day or smiling at strangers or hugging. In fact, a recent book of mine, a historical book, was called Dancing in the Streets, A History of Collective Joy. So you cannot call me a sourpuss. I wrote the book on joy, and I just felt I had to get that clear, right away. What I'm going after in my new book, Bright-Sided, is the ideology, and it's a very distinctively American ideology of positive thinking, the idea that you really should be cheerful, upbeat, and optimistic at all times, and if you're not feeling that way, then you better work on yourself till you get cheerful, upbeat, and optimistic. Now, I first encountered this ideology, this mandatory kind of positive thinking, 8 years ago when I was being treated for breast cancer. Of course, I was upset, shocked, horrified. I had known risk factors whatsoever, and besides, I thought you had to have breast cancer, but apparently there are a few exceptions made. And my first thought was to reach out for support from other people going through the same thing. I really did want some sisterly support in this, and that is not what I found, though. As I went out into the web and, got books and so on about it, first thing I found was pink ribbons. All right, this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I am not down with pink ribbons. It's not at all. First, it all started for me when I was actually in the radiologist's waiting room about to find out that there was something wrong, and I found an ad in the local newspaper for a pink breast cancer teddy bear. And that was kind of an existential turning point for me, because I realized that I'm not afraid of dying, but I am terrified of dying with a pink teddy bear tucked under my arm. There's a lot of infantilization, especially of breast cancer patients. For example, there's a foundation in New York that was giving out tote bags to women going through breast cancer treatment in New York City and some of the big institutions there. And I got hold of one of these tote bags, and it had some little rhinestone jewelry, and it had moisturizers and cologne and all kinds of, girly things like that, and a box of crayons. So I called the foundation up, got the person who was responsible for this tote bag, and I said, it's really very nice of you to do this, but what's with the crayons? And she said, "That's in case you have any thoughts you want to write down as you go through this experience." "I'm a writer," I said. "We don't use crayons anymore." Anyway, the other thing I found is this mandatory optimism. The idea that you should not only think positively about your disease, you should embrace your disease as a good thing that is happening to you. For example, there's a book called The Gift of Cancer, A Call to Awakening, which tells you that cancer is your ticket to your real life. Or you could go on the web today and get a t-shirt saying, "Thank you, cancer." I just didn't feel grateful somehow. And if anybody here is thinking of breast cancer as a gift, I would just say, take me off your Christmas list. I don't want anything from you. At one point, I went to the message board of the Komen Foundation, which is the largest of the pink ribbon outfits in America, and I posted something under the inflammatory subject line, angry. And I said I was angry about the barbaric forms of treatment for cancer. And I could go on and on about chemotherapy as a barbaric sledgehammer form of treatment with, which is way overrated. And then I went on about how come we have an epidemic of breast cancer in this country and we don't know what causes it? You know, what's going on? There's something environmental or lifestyle sort of thing here we don't know. And the responses I got from other women with the disease were mostly like this one who wrote and said, "Barb, you need to run, not walk, to get some counseling." You know, that there was something wrong with me, in addition to the disease, this other problem. And over again, I encountered this as I went through the chemotherapy and the other horrors. The idea that your survival depends on your attitude, that you are more likely to recover from cancer if you have a positive attitude. I'm sure everybody here has heard that in some form. Now, how does a positive attitude fight cancer? Supposedly by boosting the immune system, which then fights the cancer. Now, as it happens, I have a PhD in cellular immunology. So you don't mess with me with statements like that. In fact, and I did a lot more research recently, and there's a lot more studies out, there is no evidence that the immune system fights cancer, except for some rare kinds that are virally caused. And why should it? The immune system is designed to fight invaders, foreign invaders, microbes. Cancer cells they're your own cells. There is no evidence, or very, very murky evidence on both sides, as to whether having a positive attitude boosts the immune system. Anyway, we do know, and enough laboratory animals have been tortured to death that we know this, that extreme stress destroys the immune system and is very bad for your health. There is no evidence, though, that says being cheerful will prevent disease or it boosts the immune system. More to the point, or more directly to the point, we now have studies, some of them just came out as recently as 2007, that look at all the studies that have been done about attitude and cancer, and they find no reason to think that a positive attitude helps in the cases of breast cancer, lung cancer, throat cancer, or neck cancer, and probably any other kind of cancer, but those are the ones that have been studied so far. But there I was in 2001, being told, essentially, that if I did not survive this, it was my own fault, because my attitude was bad. That was my first encounter with mandatory positive thinking. And it kind of went out of my mind. I went back to, doing a lot, my usual reporting beat and everything, which is about economic inequality and poverty and the decline of the middle class. And then I began to see that positive thinking in this form was not restricted to people with cancer. That in fact, it's, it's ubiquitous. Are you perhaps not rich? There may be some people in this room who are not rich for some reason. You can attract, according to the literature on positive thinking, you can attract money to yourself with your thoughts. It will just come to you. If you beam out, wealth and prosperity thoughts to the universe, it will come to you. Please don't try to explain that you're unemployed or that your wages are low or your bills are too high and that's why you're poor, because those are just, quote, excuses as far as this ideology goes. In the whole last decade and a half, a whole industry has grown up to promote positive thinking to anybody who hasn't found it on their own, generally in the form of motivation. You can buy the motivational books, you can get the DVDs and CDs and listen to them over and over. If you have the money, you might choose to go to a weekend or week-long event in an exotic location with a heavy-hitting motivational speaker and get your attitude completely turned around until you become wealthy and successful. You may have heard about the tragic accident the week before last in Sedona, Arizona, where 3 people had died in the sweat lodge part of a weekend experience with a motivational speaker, James Arthur Ray. Somehow they were not beaming out the right thoughts. Or you can get your positive thinking in the form of objects. There's a whole company called Successories, which manufactures the inspirational posters and little tchotchkes and things you can put around your house to get you pumped up. There's the Life is Good line of items. You have that in California too? Life is good, I'm not going to debate that proposition, life is good. But I do have to wonder about people who feel the need to state that on the tire cover on the back of their Jeep. What is with that? I was in the grocery store line a couple of weeks ago in Alexandria, Virginia, where I live, and I noticed the man standing behind me was wearing a T-shirt saying, "Life is crap." And I thought, my man, What a pickup line. Anyway, some people have had enough, I guess. Now, the trouble is that this is not entirely voluntary. You are likely to run into positive thinking or exhortations to think positively, especially in the corporate workplace, where it is ubiquitous. And I argue in my book that the way this became such an industry, and was because it was picked up by big corporations, and it was picked up by big corporations as a way of managing downsizing. Starting in the 80s and going on into the 90s and right up to the present, you brought in the motivational speakers. When you lay off people, they get sent to outplacement firms where they'll get the pep talks about how this is really a wonderful thing that's happening to them and so on. And the other function of it in the workplace is after the downsizing, you bring in the motivational speakers and books and so forth and put the posters up to get the people who survived the layoff to now do the work of 2 or 3 people. So it's pretty clear that that's the connection here. So I began to, of course, see the connection to my own experience with cancer. And, that in both cases, the layoff victim, the cancer victim, is that you take a person who is going through something really difficult in their lives, tell them that it's not bad at all. In fact, it's an opportunity. It's a growth opportunity. It's a transition. In the case of cancer, over and over, I have read how breast cancer is supposed to make you more sensitive and spiritual and more evolved. It didn't work with me. Got meaner, nastier, And I understand there's a book I have to get hold of that a breast cancer victim wrote called Breast Cancer Made Me a Shallower Person. That's the kind of sisterhood I was looking for. And of course, they tell you that you'll get out of this rough patch through positive thinking, which there's some truth to that in the employment realm, because it's self-fulfilling. They only want to hire positive people. You know, less and less do experience and skills count in the corporate workplace. What counts is the attitude. Can you flatter the boss? Can you keep the mood in the office happy? In fact, the advice from all the business self-help books to managers is to fire negative people. Get rid of people who will drag down the mood with their irritating questions or doubts. Something kind of ghastly that's similar has happened in some breast cancer support groups, where women whose cancer has metastasized have been expelled from the group because who wants to be around such a downer kind of thing? But, you know, you just have to eliminate that from your life. There's an incentive to think positively. The carrot that is held out to us all the time is that you can actually cause things to come to you. Good things come to you if you think positively. And the big example of that recently was the book in 2006 called The Secret. Anybody here read it? Okay, why aren't you rich? You know, the idea there, which was not new to this book, but is really quite an old idea in American culture, is that, as so many motivational speakers put it, the universe is a big mail order department. It is waiting for your orders. Send them in. And in fact, you know, how much money you want, when you want it, you know, what size denomination of bills you wanted, I don't know. You just send that message out to the universe, it comes to you. There is well, let me just tell you a couple of examples how this works. In the book The Secret, Rhonda Byrne, the author, tells about a woman who wanted to find a boyfriend. And so she decided to, you know, use The Secret, that kind of positive thinking. She emptied out half of her closet in her bedroom. She emptied out half of her garage and went around saying, "Thank you, universe, for bringing a man into my life." And sure enough, some poor sucker materialized and needed a closet and a garage. And actually, I know him and have been involved with him quite a bit. You know, that sort of thinking, it actually worked. You can attract money to yourself, and this comes from the book Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. By this means, and I'm quoting now, place your hand over your heart and say, "I admire rich people. I bless rich people. I love rich people. And I'm going to be one of those rich people too." And if you do that enough in the morning and I don't know how many times during the day, it will work for you. Or you can use, if you're a Christian evangelical, you'll probably turn to the Christian, sort of Christian quote mark version of this, which is really what powers the megachurches. The megachurch phenomenon is not about fire and brimstone and sin and damnation or anything like that. For my research, I went to the largest megachurch in the United States, Joel Osteen's church in Houston. There are no crosses in it. There are no crucifixes in it. There are no images of Jesus. You know why? Because those are bummers. You know, to think about that, to think about the torture of Jesus and the redemption from sin. So they don't do that. The whole message is God wants you to be rich. God wants to prosper you. So get out of his way, you know, stop putting up blocks to it and let it happen. Now, you might be thinking, and I'm asked this a lot, well, what's wrong if people want to embrace a delusion that makes them feel better? Why should I be such a Grinch as to say that's a bad idea. And I have a couple of things to say about that. One, and as I'll take a hard line here, delusion is always dangerous. And the big example I would give of that is the '08 financial meltdown. There are many things that fed into that. I'm not going out, obviously, into a whole analysis of the economics and the different weird, exotic financial instruments and so on. But, you know, many, many people got way over their heads in debt, ordinary people. And in what frame of mind do you assume large amounts of debt? Well, a positive frame of mind. You think that you're not going to get sick, your car's not going to break down, you're not going to lose your job, and you're going to be able to pay it off. And if your pastor is in addition saying, as Joel Osteen has said many times, God wants you to have a larger house, and you could never before qualify for a mortgage, and somebody comes along and says, boy, do I have the mortgage for you, it seems like God has reached down to help you with that. Mostly, though, I blame the top levels of a corporate culture which by the middle of this decade was completely in a bubble of mandatory optimism and positive thinking. Countrywide mortgage, for example, which arguably, set off the whole subprime crisis, has been described by a former vice president as having a cult-like atmosphere, a culture of high fives and woo-woos, or whatever. I can't do that noise right, the woo sound. But the other thing that I found is that people who raised questions were eliminated or told to shut up. There are so many examples of this. You could not voice negativity in the workplace, including in the finance industry. My favorite example, and there are many of them, is the man who ran the real estate division of Lehman Brothers in 2006 went to the CEO of Lehman Brothers and said, I think this housing thing is a bubble, and we better adapt our business plan accordingly. For that, he was fired, because that was negative thinking. You don't want that around. Nobody could see it coming except for, a half dozen people or so, economists, but mostly corporate America had gone into this bubble of denial where bad things could never happen. The other problem I have with the whole ideology of positive thinking is I think it's cruel, just plain cruel. Some people in the cancer care business, for example, oncology nurses, are beginning to speak out against this pressure on patients to be positive, saying it's just another burden. It's like saying in addition to your disease, you've got this thing wrong in your head, which you've got to work on. It's also cruel, totally cruel, to the victims of other misfortunes or awful disasters. When the tsunami of 2006 happened, the author of The Secret was asked to explain it, and her comment was essentially that the people, the victims of the tsunami, must have been sending out tsunami-like vibrations into the universe, because nothing happens to you unless you have attracted it to yourself. I'm very upset when it's applied to people who are poor or having economic hard times, and so many people are now. I see them quoted, people quoted all the time who've been searching for jobs for months and months in the last year, and will say things like, I'm trying so hard to keep positive. And I want to say, don't bother trying that. You deserve to be angry. You deserve to ask questions about what kind of economy this is that cannot use the talents and the experience and the skills of so many people. It just tosses them away. Now, I have my own very radical alternative to positive thinking. It is not negative thinking, because I think negative thinking can be just as delusional. I mean, you can delude yourself into thinking that everything you do is going to fail or make you miserable. The alternative is realism, trying to see the world not colored by either our wishes or our fears, and understand what is really happening so we can do something about it. That very often means building movements for social change, for political change. And then, you know, I've been asked by people I respect a lot, well, how can you motivate people to be in a social movement or to do anything if you don't pop them up with optimism? And I'll just give you one answer to that. And it comes from American history. This is a point I learned from my daughter. She used to be a columnist for the LA Times, and she wrote, about the Declaration of Independence. When they signed it, when those men signed it, they had no reason to think they were going to win a war against England. You know, they did not. It was ridiculous. They furthermore knew that individually, they were now liable to charges of treason with punishment by hanging. Did this stop them? Did they say, oh, well, let's just sit here and send some independence-type vibrations into the universe and see what happens? No. They said, we're going to do it anyway. We are going to fight for what we believe in, and if necessary, we will die trying. That's courage. That's determination. I think we should try those things along with realism again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, you realize you're in California, which might be ground zero for positive thinking. You're clearly not without humor. I found this book pretty funny in a lot of places. I could kind of imagine you at these conferences that you're going to, and as you ask these gently probing questions of these people and trying not to stare incredulously back at them. Were you ever charmed by any of them in spite of yourself?
Charmed by any of the motivational speakers or I interviewed or met?
The people who were just trying to find something.
No, I wasn't charmed. I'll just tell you about, just give you, are there any like science types here? You know, tech types? Good, okay. One of the things that drives me crazy is the abuse of quantum physics. And, you know, I went to this this big national conference for motivational speakers, and it was all about quantum physics and how quantum physics explains how you can get anything with your thoughts. And, you know, if you want to talk about it more, send in a question, and we'll talk about it more. But I met a life coach there from Southern California, and they were all very friendly people, and I said, you know, this quantum physics stuff, you know, it's not based on anything. I mean, I have enough of a science background to know this is, I have no polite word for it, but I found one. And you know what she said? She said, you mean it doesn't work for you? And that's when I felt like I am alone in the universe. You know, I really am.
Well, it was interesting, too, in your book, you point out a lot of cases where these people are scientists or academics or working in a pseudo-scientific or pseudo-academic setting, but they were not comfortable with being asked questions about it. If you tried to go a little bit deeper about their premises or their formulas, they resisted that. Is that typically what you found?
I took on positive psychology, which is sort of the academic wing of this. I have nothing against the idea of positive psychology. Any positive psychologists here? You know, the idea that psychology should concern itself with states like joy or happiness, and as well as with neurosis and suffering. But what positive psychology has become is sort of a wing of the whole motivational business.
To legitimize it?
To legitimize it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where you'll hear the really unwarranted claims about what positive thinking will do for your longevity and your health.
Mm-hmm. And say it's substantiated by science, so therefore it's all
Yeah.
it's all good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have to say, this book is a great conversation starter. It really is. Your previous books, Nickel and Dimed and Bait and Switch, seem to have a huge response, and it were enormously popular and really seemed to resonate. And I'm wondering, this book has not been out that long, but what has the response been so far? The popular response, not book reviews, but the popular response. Are you getting any patterns in feedback so far?
Well, I hate to be positive, but I'm really very gratified. I checked my email this morning, and the part that comes through my website from people who don't have my regular email address, and so many people are saying thank you. I had cancer. I couldn't stand it. When I was constantly being told to think positively. Or at work, I've been told again and again I was negative because I was trying to raise questions or something. And I'm feeling very good right now about that. I haven't had any death threats.
Good, excellent.
No positive people have threatened to kill me yet, but so.
Good. All right, well, we have a couple questions from the audience that kind of have a political theme to them. So, do you identify any particular presidential administration that either promoted or embodied the positive thinking ideology, and to what end?
Well, we've had, in my lifetime, 2 super positive presidents. You'll see a theme here, Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush. And Bush is a very interesting example, W. Bush, because he was a cheerleader in college, and I think he understood the presidency to be a continuation of that role. I mean, I have the quotes from him saying, that his job was to exude optimism. So Iraq would be a cakewalk, the economy was fundamentally sound, everything like that. And he, we know, lived in a kind of bubble of optimism. Condoleezza Rice, somewhat belatedly, told us, Bob Woodward, that she wanted to raise questions about Iraq, but she knew that the president hated pessimism, and questions would have been, defined as pessimism. And the good news now is we found out this week that George W. Bush is now a motivational speaker himself.
Excellent. Where do the tea baggers fit? I think this is referred to the Tea Party people.
They are not positive thinkers. No, they are people who are complaining, who are angry. That's something I was doing some research about this summer, and my analysis in a couple of lines is, we have 2 things going on in America. We have the worst economic hard times since the Great Depression, and we have the first black president. And those things somehow come together in a lot of people's minds. The race issue is a millimeter under all that talk about health reform. That's what my reporting convinced me of anyway.
Mm-hmm. What's the distinction between faith and optimism?
Optimism is a cognitive state, where you have thought about the future, what could happen, and you have come to the conclusion that things are going to turn out well through thinking. It's not any emotion. Faith, I will have to say, I don't understand. I don't. I'm not a believer. And I'm nothing against those of you who are, but I don't get it.
So this person asked, don't optimists and pessimists also consider themselves realists?
Yes. I don't know. But I think that is patently untrue in the case of a person who takes the advice of so many life coaches and motivational gurus, that you should not read the newspapers or watch the news because it might bring you down. There's bad stuff out there. Now, when you have to close yourself off from the world and from information or from people who ask difficult questions, then, that's sad. That's nothing realistic about that.
Right, a refusal to even hear it.
Exactly.
And what I understood from your book is that it's one thing to have a sunny disposition or a positive outlook, be pleasant to be around, but it's another thing to be delusional about it. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, yes, and I would give an example of a very common human experience and activity, which is child raising. I'm on my second round with little tiny granddaughters, and that is not something you can do with positive thinking. You cannot, when the toddlers are off in the other room and it's mysteriously quiet for a little while, assume they are reading Baby Einstein. You have to assume they're putting forks in the electrical outlets. It's all about, of course you have a great time with them, and it's about smiling and laughing and giggling and stuff like that and playing, but it's also about vigilance. I mean, that's how we survived as a species, is by being vigilant. And you see something moving in the tall grass, don't assume it's the welcome wagon coming. That could be a lion. And we need that kind of vigilance to survive.
In your research in these different industries around positive thinking, did you come across any particular group that was focused on child raising or educating children?
No, because even the positive psychologists will admit, and that is one activity that brings people down. It reduces reported happiness. Having children reduces happiness as self-reported by people. Now that sounds weird to me, because children are such a big part of my life. And but because this vigilant stance you have to assume.
Yeah, you don't see that crocheted on the pillows too often of the happiness, or having children reduces happiness. This question is, don't you feel that our culture's push for antidepressant use is at the root of this optimism phenomena?
Well, the positive thinking movement or cult in America goes back to the mid-19th century, and I trace its roots in this book. So it obviously precedes that. But I do think it's very interesting that America, the birthplace of positive thinking, the place that exports positive thinking around the world, also consumes 2/3 of the world's prescriptions for antidepressants. What does that tell us? I don't know. There's more I'd like to find out here, because somebody suggested to me the other night at an event like this that the heavy use of antidepressants by Americans reflects the fact that you do have, too many of us have to put on that smiley face every day when we go to work to get along. And you just know that you can't come in and say, I'm having a rough time. That you'll be ostracized.
What countries do you think have a healthier, more realistic attitude when you look at these global patterns?
Most of them, but probably not Australia. And I exclude Australia because it has become a secondary exporter of positive thinking and motivational speakers and books and so forth. It's spreading around the world through American business culture. Some of the same motivational speakers, will show up in China now, or other places in the world, and through religion, through this prosperity gospel, and through positive psychology.
Does it translate, I wonder? It seems like such a uniquely American trait, doesn't it?
No, I think it is very strongly American and associated with Americans.
Maybe that's why it's desired. because it's an American
Or,
export.
a lot of them think we're really nuts. They don't understand that. What is it with Americans? Why can't you have a normal talk with a conversation with them? Why are they smiling all the time like that, And there's a lot of bafflement about us, too.
Yeah, you had a quote early on in the book about a remark by the Russian poet. What was that?
Joseph Brodsky, I once heard him say in a little seminar setting that the trouble, he was an emigre from the Soviet Union, that the trouble with Americans is that they had never suffered. That really pissed me off. Did he know who invented the blues? We know, the Trail of Tears, we're big on that. But what, he was, that was a stereotype of white upper middle class America as people who are perpetually trying to exude optimism.
This writer asks, in 12-step programs, people are encouraged to make gratitude lists, to focus on the positives in one's life rather than the negatives. Do you think there's any validity to that as a self-help tool?
Yeah, no, I have nothing against that. I got some help from a technique which is sort of connected. I used to have a terrible fear of public speaking, and I used to be a wreck a week before I had to speak publicly anywhere, and I learned from a kind of pop psychology book that I should make a list of the things I feared would happen and then refute them. So I put down attack of projectile vomiting. I said, probably not, and go down the list. No, I think there are there are things we can do cognitively to get over. I was being delusional in a negative way, and I had to get over that.
Expecting the worst, you mean?
Always, oh yeah. In public speaking, anyway.
Right. Which goes back to the point that the opposite of positive thinking is not negative thinking.
Right. Yeah.
This is another question from an audience member. After the financial meltdown a year ago, many people said, this is good. It's an opportunity to live more simply and to band together. There's more time now for socializing and community.
Yeah. And there certainly was that sort of romanticization of the recession by fairly affluent people, the simple life now, and
5 homes instead of 7.
Yeah, right. And but the amount of suffering caused by the recession is simply, I don't think, been covered adequately by the media. And one reason is the media don't like negative stories. And so when I approached some editors with the New York Times in the springtime, said I want to write about the effect of the recession on the already poor, I was expecting to be rejected because I said, but the amount of homelessness, the amount of people crowding several families into homes, that's what I've been reporting on for the last few months, and it's not the sort of simple life at all. Mm-hmm. It's very terrifying.
In your book, you highlight some of these areas that you talk about, starting with this, your reaction when you were diagnosed with breast cancer and the response you got from people, and then to the mega churches and the positive psychology movement. But then you talk about its role in the economy and really doing serious damage to other people. So then it's not just about somebody who uses positive thinking or affirmations to make themselves feel good and get through the day. It's people that are making decisions that affect hundreds of thousands of people. Right. Can you just talk a little bit more about that and why, the effect of that and why that's so important?
Well, I think I remember reading one of these books on the law of attraction and how you can get anything you want. And I noticed that one of the blurbs was from the financial company, I forget what it was, they keep changing, that handled my retirement savings. Oh my God. You know, are decisions about my savings being made by some fool who thinks he controls the universe with his mind? And I thought that can't be true. But it was true. It was absolutely true. I mean, we entrusted our savings, you know, we entrusted so much power to people who were operating, who were deluded. And that delusion goes along also with their great wealth. As one Wall Street insider said to me, I was asking him, I said, are these top guys, they surely don't believe this law of attraction stuff and all that mysticism. He said, oh, absolutely they do. And if you're worth $500 million, it's true. You can have anything you want, almost just by thinking of it. And they got off in their bubble not only of optimism, but of complete disconnectedness from how the rest of us live.
I love that line. It's a quote from somebody who's commenting on this period and saying, where were the grown-ups?
Yeah. Well, right. When we found out that the ratings agencies were in the pocket of the companies they were supposedly monitoring, you know, then, yeah, there were no grown-ups. As Paul Krugman put it, nobody wanted to be a party pooper. You know, a good time was being had by some, and no one wanted to be the person who said there could be a problem here.
What's the role of advertising in all of this?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. Because advertising plays a lot on our fears, too. Mm-hmm. Fears of rejection and failure. But I'd have to think about that more.
There's certainly a lot that run on the theme of, you know, being your best and being better than you are, and, you know, if you only do this, then you'll be so much better. Kind of like, if you only believe it will happen.
Be your best self now, to
That's
quote
right.
the Joel Ostein's best-selling book on positive Christianity.
This questioner wants to know, how did you go from being an immunologist to an expert on the decline of the middle class?
Easy. No, I was, when I was a graduate student, I got swept up in the anti-war movement and the women's movement, and I decided I did not want to be a research scientist. I wanted to be, quote, relevant. And it turned, you know, as an activist, I became a writer. I didn't say, oh, I'm going to switch and be a writer now. I was an activist, and that was something I could do, as it turned out, that I liked doing. So sort of evolved that way. But I never regret that rusty old PhD in cell biology, because who knows when you come across ridiculous claims being justified by pseudoscience.
Well, and that leads to this question. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of protest in terms of social change?
Very important. Why aren't we doing it more? It was so distressing to me this summer that the only major kind of protest came from the 9/12ers, the teabaggers, with this demented idea that Obama was going to bring in death panels. We already have death panels, and they're run by Aetna and, United Healthcare and all. They're the ones who decide who's going to live and die or get care. And I do think that one of the obstacles to people protesting and organizing has been this ideology of positive thinking, that it is bad to be a complainer. You don't want to be a victim. You don't want to say, I found it very hard this summer to get people to talk to me about their subprime mortgages and their evictions, because it is so embarrassing to be a victim. It's embarrassing sometimes to talk about being laid off. We have to get over this and say, yeah, I was victimized. Now I'm looking for others in the same boat so we can rock this boat, if that metaphor works.
Can you talk about how positive thinking and realistic thinking, realism, affect those in severe poverty and their ability to fight against it?
Well, it upsets me that low-income people are also exposed to this. If you get onto TANF, Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, which is the what we had after the elimination of welfare, you will be sent to job readiness training, which will include all these pep talks about how poverty is an attitude, and it's in your mind, and how you have to now be positive. That's the main thing that gets people ahead. So it's a method of social control.
You mentioned Joel Osteen and his church and their themes, and this questioner is asking about Oprah also, seeing some similarities there, and you do mention Oprah a bit in the book. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I just had a bock come out.
Yes.
I'm an author on a book tour. You think I'm going to say anything negative
Sorry,
about Oprah?
Sorry. What am I thinking?
No,
We're trying to help.
she has promoted these things. She was a big factor behind the success of the book, The Secret. But as have been Larry King and Ellen DeGeneres. I mean, it's all over the place. You can't just single her out for her role.
Were they promoting it, or were they just...
Well, you have the person on your show, and you treat them like they're speaking rationally when they're talking about, attracting money into your wallet with your thoughts. I call that promotion, yeah.
Okay. Well, speaking of television appearances, this person thought you were great on Jon Stewart.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That was a high point of my life. He's such a nice guy, too. I mean, he's a sweetheart.
And this person also wants to know, how do you cope with difficulty?
I have to try to say something socially responsible other than say drugs and alcohol. Right. No, I read a lot of novels, good fiction. I have a great family and lots of friends, and I play with my 5- and 7-year-old granddaughters and forget whatever was bothering me.
Well, speaking of children, what do you think about the self-esteem movement in schools, praising kids, giving rewards frequently, etc.?
Well, yeah, that whole idea that every kid is perfect and amazing, which is actually only true of my grandchildren. Right. It's very, that's sort of an earlier phase. In the 80s, that was really big. And women got very much into it. The feminist movement got into it. We've just got to boost our self-esteem. There's something to that, but again, I think it individualizes the problem too much. I wanted to see women be assertive and strong, but we don't have to each convince ourselves that we are goddesses walking the earth to do that.
And this is a follow-up to that, quoting you today, that delusions are dangerous, yet positive illusions in everyday life, that one's child is bright, capable, able to do extraordinary things, for example, bestows confidence and energetic determination that might not otherwise become manifest. What do you think?
Ooh, that word manifest there scares me. It's a little, that's part of the jargon. Well, I mean, you don't tell kids that they're dumb, I don't, of course not. But, well, let me just give you a study. It's done on California high school students just a couple of years ago. And they compared those students who were very optimistic about their social standing, which is a big issue in high school, to those who were realistic about their social standing and their popularity and realized they weren't really very popular or whatever. And they found that the realistic ones were much less likely to fall into depression or self-destructive behavior. I don't think there is a great defense that can be made for encouraging delusions in children. Fantasies, imagination, yes, but not delusions.
Well, that leads into this question, which is very local, about Palo Alto, about some teenagers, 4 teenagers in Palo Alto have killed themselves over the past 6 months here in Palo Alto by putting themselves in front of commuter trains. And school officials have discouraged honest, open talk about this for fear of glamorizing it and possibly inspiring copycats. Do you agree or disagree with that as a strategy?
I don't know. Let's have a vote. And really, I mean, how many people think that should be talked about openly? How many think it be talked about? Okay. How many think it should be suppressed in case of copycat? I guess we're in favor. Sorry, you lost. We're in favor of open discussion of it, which probably should include discussion of the copycat phenomenon and how dumb would that be to kill yourself because it's part of a fad.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially in light of what seems to be a real attempt to promote the positive and the self-esteem. It's a very high-achieving culture, and I think here locally, families are really rocked by this and not sure how to respond to it, if you should talk about it or not, or face the full spectrum of human experience, or just...
I think we have to face it, yeah.
You had mentioned, I think in one of your other appearances related to your breast cancer experience, that feeling like this rejection of anything other than the positive almost felt like an absence of empathy or a lack of empathy.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think one of the things going on here is a huge cultural empathy deficit. You know, one of the things that really bothers me is the signs, you might have seen them on the back of somebody's truck or car, that says whining with a cancel sign through it. Now, what does that mean? It means, does it mean that I don't want to hear your troubles? I have no time for your problems. I mean, this whole thing about nobody can be negative in the workplace, that can mean the person who, was recently bereaved comes to work in 2 weeks and then sort of said, what, you're not over that yet? Like, do we have no time to listen and to, we not be very capable of helping with another person's pain, but the least you can do is listen and make time for that person. And I don't think, as a culture, we're willing to do that.
Well, we are at the point in the program where we have time for just one last question. So I'd like to ask, do you see this book as kind of a cultural observation about a point in time of where we are, or would you like to see it more as a call to action of some kind, or a push for a shift in attitude?
Both, yeah. Every book I write, I hope, inspires millions of people to march on Washington, but it hasn't worked so far. But no, you do. This is asking for a shift in how we think. This is sort of an emperor has no clothes kind of proposition. That there is a systematic effort to delude us, to keep us pacified, to quell dissent, to prevent people from standing up and saying, this is wrong, things have to change. And we have to get over that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed this afternoon's program brought to you by the Commonwealth Club Silicon Valley. Again, we'd like to thank Barbara Erhenreich, author of Bright-Sided, How the Relentless... The book is called Bright-Sided: How the Relentless Promotion of Positive Thinking Has Undermined America. Thank you for joining us. And now this meeting of the Commonwealth Club is adjourned.